members of our Congress, you will always have within our government those that are above the law. Hey, it's me, and welcome to MAFIA. Now, whatever you do, don't feel down after listening to this video, because it's not my purpose. I'm very optimistic, and I don't have any worry about the Trump presidency or even his re-election. But I'm gonna have to tell you that, the deep state, to me, it's really the banking system. You have the FBI, you have the CIA, and the State Department, and some elements in other departments in the executive branch, and then you have some minions in the Senate or in the House that are kind of used like tools, right? Like a Trey Gowdy, let's say, or an Adam Schiff, or people like that. But to us, they're senators, they're reps. But to the deep state, they're pawns, like little minions. And we talk about the daily news. You see most people on YouTube talking about whatever was on CNN or Fox News, or what this pundit said, what the other pundit said. But if you really zoom out, what you have is, for many decades, is a deep state of the organizations that I mentioned and departments. And it's kind of like a coalition, a lot of liberals there, but people make the mistake to indicate that the deep state is all liberal. It's not. But I think you could say that it's mostly globalist. And you've had a lot of globalists in the Republican Party. For example, free trade, the way they've been handling that with Bush Sr., Clinton, NAFTA, all of that, and the way they helped out China, that's really free trade, giving trade away for free. And to hell with the American workers or our manufacturing base. So it has been a globalist entity, the deep state, and that is, even the CIA has been working together with Five Eyes, 21 Eyes, Seven Eyes, intelligence agencies across the world. But you also have the NSA sharing information with overseas intelligence gathering services. You have Amazon, you have Facebook, you have Twitter, Google, all working with the CIA and the NSA to supply them with more information. And you could say that, there is a reason why the social media is being attacked by the left, because even though we see them as, pure leftists, to the real left, the American left, they're not left enough. They don't censor Republicans enough. And that is because they have an interest in whoever is in charge as well. So they cannot go all out being liberal, because they have many deals going on with even the current administration, or at least departments within it. What I'm really saying is that in the last many decades, we had presidents that were really just puppets in many ways. Now, Bush Sr. is a kind of exception, because he was in the CIA for a long time. He was thoroughly an establishment guy and a CIA deep state guy. Meaning that he understood, he went against Reagan very viciously, even in the 70s. Finally, when Reagan won because of the people, he was picked as a running mate simply to appease the deep state. Now, many things that happened in the Reagan administration were not just Reagan. I mean, it was the deep state in control in many ways, and people around Reagan saying, we have to do this, we have to do that. Eventually, that also led to the deep state throwing a bone to the left with the amnesty. And, of course, the Pentagon, the DOD, it's also part of the deep state, naturally, but there is a difference. The military and intelligence, there is almost like a two-headed snake there, where the Pentagon is just one of the heads, and the intelligence services, including the FBI and the State Department, it's kind of all rolled up into one, meaning that many people that work for state are actually CIA assets or had some connection to the CIA or are heavily monitored by the CIA. Talking about ambassadors, spouses, and a whole bunch of people. So it's a real operation, and it's worldwide. Now, the interesting part of this is that if you look at some of the events that happen, in many ways you can see how a president had become almost obsolete. So that, of course, you can get somebody like Choco, and he's there, he's a puppet, he doesn't know anything, he's harmless. And so for the deep state, I mean, that's like the perfect president, a complete doofus, who has an Iranian handler, Valerie Jarrett, and the deep state could really, relax and do what they wanted. And it just so happens that a couple of policies that Choco was interested in were, like a match with what the deep state had, because, leftists have more in common with the globalism because they're socialist than, let's say, a conservative or a nationalist. Be that as it may, Choco was a puppet, a complete puppet. So as I mentioned in another video about it, when you had the Bin Laden raid, Choco wasn't even involved. I mean, they had to have his okay, but it was just like a formality. I mean, everything was started without him. They just informed him. In fact, they went to get him at a golf course. He was playing golf. He didn't even know. He was completely clueless. And then they bring him in, and then he can play Commander-in-Chief for a while. But he wasn't the Commander-in-Chief at all. And so you see him sitting there in a corner, and they gave him a jacket to hide that he was wearing his golf clothes. And he was angry because he knew that he was not the Commander-in-Chief. He was not in charge at all. And then if you look at what happened in 2009, it wasn't Choco or even Valerie Jarrett that picked the cabinet members. It was Citibank, Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs. In fact, Citibank chose half of all cabinet members. Half. And the other half, the other banks. Now, doesn't that tell you something? Yes, it does. It tells you that the whole Choco administration was a puppet show. And sure, they could do their little social justice stuff and the green energy stuff. These things don't affect the deep state. When it came to foreign policy, you saw that, it was more like Bill and Hillary Clinton type foreign policy, or something that could come from Republicans. And in fact, Lindsey Graham, John McCain, they were all in favor of everything that happened. So again, I'm saying, was this really Choco? No, I don't think so. Because, in fact, the Libya policy, for example, they called it the Hillary policy, and she was pushing for it. But it wasn't even her, it was the deep state, meaning the Pentagon, and then the other head of the two-headed snake, all the intelligence services, including the CIA. So I'm not really sure who really runs the show. Is it the CIA? I think so. I think it's really the CIA and the DOD. I think those two really run the show. And it's a kind of two-headed snake in that when you have them moving together, it's something that is very powerful. When they're not moving together, it creates some imbalance, and that's what you have right now. So you have a president who's not a puppet. You have a president who's radically changing the whole nature of how we operate. It's now AFF, America First Forever. And that means no more globalism. No more UN, EU, and, even Five Eyes. It's something that should be obsolete. I mean, you cannot put your country first if you're sharing intelligence with 5 other nations, or in some cases 21 other nations, like the 21 Eyes or the 7 Eyes or the 9 Eyes. And you have this integration of intelligence across the world, sharing of data of Americans to some of those foreigners. We are not safe in that way. And I believe that Iran played a key role, because if you see that, pallets and pallets of cash can go to Iran with a private plane, that has CIA written all over it, and that must have had the okay from the whole deep state, which is very concerning, because this would mean that the deep state is really kind of favoring Iran. And so the Iran deal was also favored, and you have to wonder why. And if you look at the Uranium One deal, which actually endangers our nation, that was also approved by the deep state. And I don't have to tell you how many cabinet members were involved in that, in approving that, as well as the FBI, the CIA, everybody approved it. And that is something that they really want to hide, because that is the real collusion with Russia. So in their globalist fever, the deep state has really gone over the edge in collaborating with Iran, giving them billions, and that is that the deep state had taken a left turn. Not because of Choco, not because of the Clintons, but just the evolution of the whole thing, and that is a globalist trend. And as I mentioned, many Republicans were involved, and so therefore you have a lot of payouts being made to the media, coming from Iran or coming from other places. And now you have President Trump, and he's strongly allied with MBS. Now the reason you have this whole Khashoggi theater is because they had a crown prince who was John Brennan's friend, essentially. The deep state, the CIA, they really molded that crown prince to eventually have a king in Saudi Arabia that was a complete puppet, responding to the deep state and globalism and everything that the deep state wanted. But the king of Saudi Arabia demoted that crown prince and lifted up MBS, the new crown prince. And now suddenly you have the world going against this lovable MBS, a lovable young guy who really likes Trump. And like I said, okay, they saw the guy in half, some fat guy. They sawed him in half for a beef between the Muslims. It's none of our business. But somehow, you see this becoming a story, and even now, you have all these people freaking out. The CIA, part of the deep state, really pushing it, disagreeing with the president, or at least trying to sabotage a good relationship with MBS. They really want MBS gone in the way that they really want Trump to be gone. Because these are two kings in the chess game where they can't just have puppets. Trump is not a puppet. MBS is not a puppet. They don't like that. They need puppets and pawns. So when you see some of those senators out there, and I swear the whole left wing of Congress, they're all a bunch of pawns, and I don't see anybody there that has any gravitas or any real power when getting involved with the deep state. They're just like minions. They have no power. And so when it comes to judges, you see that the deep state is not so concerned. And I often wonder why the deep state would not be concerned. Of course, the left wing is very concerned, and you saw they're freaking out. But if the deep state didn't want Kavanaugh or Gorsuch, they would be out. They wouldn't be justices right now. And I still wonder about that. I don't have a clear answer for that. Maybe it's because it doesn't affect the deep state, because the deep state is there. It's almost extrajudicial in the sense that they operate. in a parallel universe almost. And it's kind of like Skynet, you know, the Terminator movie. And that would make Trump John Connor. And I believe that the deep state is worried that President Trump may end up going in one direction. So I don't feel like Mueller is, you know, you could see it as a left-wing play, and it is in many ways, but I feel it's more of a deep state play. And it's not so much to remove Trump, it's to control him, to have a check on him, and if he causes trouble, to remove him. I really feel it's that way. And even if the left wing succeeds in creating some problem, they're not going to cry any tears over Trump being replaced, because they prefer to have a puppet anyway. And so they've been there for decades. Presidents come and go. They don't care who the president really is, as long as it doesn't interfere with their management of our nation and intelligence. And of course you have the Pentagon. I mean, it's almost like a Skynet of its own. But I will tell you that there is no nation first. When you're talking about a behemoth like the deep state, a two-headed snake, you cannot expect this two-headed snake to be all like all American and, you know, AFF, America First Forever. No, because they're not that entity that, you know, belongs to the U.S. Constitution or was created by we the people. Because they're like Skynet, they have their own rules. And you see that sometimes when you're looking at the DOJ and the FBI, and that's just a small part of the deep state. It's like they're an elite type of people, and they feel like they're above the law, and they decide what's right and wrong. Not the rule of law. They decide what's right and wrong. That's why you see these establishment people like Comey and all of them are just above the law, seemingly, and they're going after people that are not above the law, meaning they decide. And if you look at the Mueller Inquisition, it's not even looking at what happened with the Trump dossier. Why? Because the FBI itself was involved. And when you see the CrowdStrike that was used for the DNC server, that company is very suspect. It was created by a Russian expat and an ex-FBI official, and has connections to Soros. Now, for some reason, the Republicans used that for Congress. The same company, CrowdStrike. Now, it turns out they were hacked as well. Now, think of it. Why would Republicans end up using the same security, if you really want to call it security firm, as the one that the Democrats had, and they were hacked? I mean, the incompetence of that company is, you know, infamous, but still, they got the contract. I mean, how do you explain that? It means they have connections to the deep state, and that if you have one of your vendors there, they also access a lot of information. But what I'm saying here is that you have the FBI and the CIA involved in Spygate, meaning spying on Trump, since 2015. Don't tell me it started, you know, after the summer of 2016. That's a joke. They started from the beginning. They started even in 2012, in my opinion, when they went after Choco's certificate of birth, and President Trump was at the forefront. They started spying on the guy, President Trump, Donald J. Trump at the time, and so it never stopped, really. But when he indicated that he was running for president, then they started spying on the guy. And it just developed, and as President Trump started winning the primaries, the spying only increased. When he got the GOP nomination, they went all in. And so Spygate never stopped, because Mueller is just another evolution of Spygate. And it's really the deep state spying on political candidates, checking them and supervising them, keeping them in check. because they don't trust we the people. Like I said, it's a type of Skynet. To them, people are insects. You get that? You're an insect. Me too. I want to be a beetle, like a cool looking beetle. How about you? Okay, you're gonna be a cockroach. No, just kidding. Choose your insect, okay? Because that's how they see you. And that also means, and I'm not even joking about it, these people have been spying also on Choco and Valerie Jarrett and Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton. And that is because, you know, presidents come and go. And they want to know who the handlers are, and they have dirt on everybody. They know everything about everyone. And so these people know everything about Choco. They have him in their, you know, fangs, I guess. They can destroy Choco in an instance. And Valerie Jarrett and Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton. I mean, they can really take down anyone. And they tried with Trump, but Trump doesn't have what those others have, because Choco, he has so much to hide. And I promise you that they know everything about this guy, everything you ever wanted to know about Choco, and many of the things that you were thinking about Choco are true. And they have that information. So he will be an eternal puppet. He cannot come out. He is a slave forever. And he was a slave. He wasn't a real president. He was just a puppet. But President Trump, he's kind of like the opposite. He doesn't have things to hide because he's way too smart. And so they're looking for anything they can use against him, to use it as leverage, you know, to make him dance like a puppet. But the problem is, President Donald J. Trump is not good at being a puppet and dancing around. He's just not doing it. And they hate it. And then, of course, you have a lot of companies out there, rich companies, including the social media companies. You have billionaires, and they form a type of cartel. And, of course, most of them are quite liberal. But you also have some conservative billionaires in that cartel, or the cabal, or a consortium of companies, and they form a part of, you know, the chess pieces. You could call them the knights, maybe, or the rooks. And then you have other, you know, the banking people. I mean, that's a lot of money. So you have to understand that when you're talking about the deep state, you're talking about those elements of government, not of banking. Okay, so deep state is really referring to the government, but they have a close alliance and collusion with not just the media conglomerates, but, you know, companies that form a cartel of sorts. Then you also have the banks, and they're also a part of it. So when we talk about daily newsies, and we talk about Democrats, Republicans, this senator, or Don Lemon said, or Hannity said, you know, it's a lot of theater. You know, it's almost meaningless. And then, of course, when you get down to the gutter, that's where I am, right? Like a little YouTuber. I mean, I'm not even globalist enough to get a partnership, a YouTube partnership. They pulled it away because what I'm saying is just, you know, I'm just like a bad guy in their ecosystem. I mean, they're always talking about their ecosystem, right? Okay, so I'm like, what? A predator, or whatever. Doesn't even matter what these liberals are saying and doing. I just know that it is so small, it's so petty compared to looking at the deep state. I mean, we're talking about something that, you know, you could have a manga cartoon about it, right? The evil deep state, or, you know, Skynet. You know, when you look at some of these movies of the past, I'm a real fan of old-time movies. They Live, or you're looking at Escape from New York, or you're looking at The Terminator, movies like that. At the time, they, kind of got their inspiration from a growing type of feeling that there is a deep state, like a parallel government and powers that, they're very greedy, they're very powerful, and that leads to some of these movies. And so when I said in the other video that, if the deep state really wants, they could cause an economic recession, and the media would pile on, Democrats would pounce, and all in all, you would have an orchestrated recession that didn't have to happen, but it will enable people to kind of shy away from President Trump, for example. I mean, that would be one way to get rid of Trump. On the other hand, if President Trump is doing things that really benefit the deep state, then perhaps they would turn around and, you would suddenly feel like there's a lot more support out there for Trump policies. And, when you're looking at the globalist entities, the UN, the EU, President Trump is not a big fan. And it turns out that he sent out Mike Pompeo to really criticize the UN and the EU once again. I mean, just recently. So it is almost like President Trump is, giving them the middle finger and saying, well, we're going to change. And, when people are ankle biting or nitpicking about Trump and the wall, like Van Coulter or some of these other media hacks, I mean, they're so small-minded. Really, they cannot even comprehend what President Trump is really doing and what he's really saying, and it is so massive in scope. President Trump really understands this two-headed snake, the deep state, in that, he knows where to go and where not to go, but at the same time, he's telling them that there's going to be a new direction. So you get that? I mean, the balls on this guy, I mean, seriously, the balls on this guy. He's basically telling the whole deep state we're going that way. And it's like, what? What just happened? And you see it the way he's handling China, Saudi Arabia, and who he's talking to and what he's saying. He has a purpose. And so, everybody in the media and, most people are just talking about the daily newsies or the policies. But if you look at the strategy of President Trump, he's bringing our nation up to the next level, which includes pointing out a new direction for the deep state. Because anybody out there saying that there's going to be mass arrests and the deep state is going to be destroyed and you're going to have military tribunals, it's just not going to happen. But what is happening is a type of controlled chaos, a new direction. President Trump is not caving in to these people, and they're doing their stuff. I mean, they're coming out with their conclusions about Khashoggi or climate change, and the government is really that large. It's a behemoth. But President Trump doesn't care. He's just like, well, I don't agree with them. But he's also telling them, we're going over there. And it takes time. I mean, we're talking about a year and a half that he's been president, and it's amazing. Like I said, the courage. I mean, he's like a hero. He's fearless. President Donald J. Trump is really fearless. And he's a leader. Because it takes a lot, to campaign without being a puppet, to be president without being a puppet, and you have the whole establishment against you, or, at least trying to sabotage you in some way, or supervising you, spying on you. And there he is, right? There he is, tireless, fearless, and so damn smart. So the deep state is watching this guy all the time, the president, because they're not used to that. I mean, he's not a puppet. And maybe they start to realize that, maybe we do have to, make this thing work. And a relationship is building, I believe, because when you have a lot of people being kicked out of the CIA, the FBI, because of the dailies and all of that, it does have an effect. I mean, the arrogance of John Brennan or James Comey, didn't you notice that it really changed over the last months? They're not as cocky anymore as they used to be like a year ago. And maybe they even realize that there's something changing. So President Trump, it takes a long time for some people to warm up to President Trump. So imagine how long it takes for the deep state to warm up to somebody who's not even a puppet. Oh, this guy's not listening to us. What are we going to do? And it's kind of neat, because if you look at the deep state, they don't have like a leader. I mean, you could say that Bush Sr. or Clinton, to some degree, and some of the ex-CIA people have some type of input. But they don't have that kind of centralized system with a leader. And even when you look at the billionaires, it's not just Soros. You have a handful of billionaires, or even more. You have a cartel of companies, you have a cartel of banks, and all of these people, they're like a group. It's like, I don't know, like almost like a colony. A colony, and then you have a colony within a colony, and they don't have someone that makes the ultimate decision. It's kind of like a herd of cows, or or like a school of fish, and they're all like, where we one go, we all go one, right? Just like the Q Brennan operation, QAnon. That's how the deep state works. And so you can prod them to go in direction. That's why I'm saying that President Trump is telling them we're going that way. And okay, do you hit a couple of cows on the butt or something? Tase them? Or do you get a couple of dogs to herd them in one way? What do you do, right? And sometimes it's unpredictable, like a school of fish. How can you predict where they're going to go? And it seems like, maybe they're going out to open sea, or maybe President Trump is saying we're going towards the coast, or something like that. I mean, I think you're trying to get a lot of people to move into a direction. It doesn't mean that they will all move into that direction at the same time, and it will not be the exact direction. It's not something that is purely scientific. So what I'm saying is President Trump is offering a kind of new direction and guiding them, and I don't know at what point or where he's tasing people, or hurting them in one way, or using a stick or a carrot. But I believe that he has that leadership where he's just explaining it in clear ways that, that herd, they will just kind of move in that direction. Because it's not so alien. It's not so far away from what they were thinking. Now, a year back, I was making a video talking about how, people like Steve Mnuchin and some of the geniuses out there are reshaping globalism into something that is nationalism. Because if you have a set of values, ideals, the way you do business, the way the banks work, if you have a globalist system and you change that to nationalism, you can still keep a lot of your principles. I mean, you can put America first forever, AFF, and still go out in the world. But when you're doing trade deals, you're going to put America first. When you're doing arms deals, you're going to put America first. You're not going to sell out your country, is what I'm saying. And that is essentially the difference between globalism and nationalism. So what I'm saying is that President Trump is engineering with his people, some of these geniuses, a system that is nationalism for our nation, America first, forever. But then, slotting that into the globalist formula. So that's okay. We can still, do business in the world. Why not? But the difference is, we're not going to be a patsy. We're not going to be an ATM for the rest of the world. We're not going to be a refugee shelter for the masses in the world that hate their own countries. And we're not going to be suckers anymore. That's a difference. So it's not that hard to get globalists to think in a new way. But the EU, the UN, and the World Bank, and WTO, a lot of those institutions are meant to rip away your sovereignty. And that is incompatible with America First Forever, AFF. It is not possible. And so that is why President Trump is making it very clear that it's not acceptable to be, you can be in the UN, but it doesn't mean that you're going to surrender anything, and you're not going to give away your sovereignty. For example, we got out of the World Court or European Court because who the hell are they, right? To decide who's guilty and who's not. That's our nation. We decide, not some international court. And so we got out. And good. And you see a lot of key people agree with that. It makes a lot of sense. And so I guess the CIA, with their 5 eyes, 21 eyes, and all of that, maybe they like it. But I feel it's not compatible with America First. So I don't know if President Trump is going to move on that. You have to cooperate, but in the same way, you have to scale it back. You just cannot openly share intelligence with other nations. It doesn't match with AFF, America First Forever. So there's a lot going on, because you're talking about decades and decades where these people get what they want. You're dealing with puppets and idiots. And that's also why we lost. And other countries benefited at our expense. And so what President Trump is saying is not something that is strange or, damaging or insane. It is something that is very logical. And it is something that is very practical. And as I mentioned, it doesn't take so much, to convert the globalist ideal into globalist yet nationalist, yet America First. It's not that difficult. And it just takes getting used to. So I always feel like the difference between love and hate, it's just like a conversation sometimes. So I feel if you expend a lot of emotion for love, that can easily turn into hatred, and vice versa. Like many people that maybe really hated President Trump, they will learn to love him. And I feel like a lot of people will also betray him. And when you look at the deep state, maybe their way was, let's say, hate or globalism, and the love is really America First. Yet you can go out there in the world and promote yourself, do business, but it's always going to be America First. And that's the anchor we need. And President Trump realizes that if we don't have that anchor of America First Forever, or nationalism, we're a ship that is completely at the mercy of the weather, the waves, and we cannot exercise any control. Now, if there's anything about the deep state that you can really show, is that they like control. Why would you collect that much data on people and spy on people unless you're looking to control things? So if you have that sense that if you have America first, yet you can have globalism, you maintain control. Because if globalism becomes a free-for-all, our nation will be gone. And then there's no more CIA, right? There's no more deep state, because the nation's gone. So, it's almost like survival that is in a balance here, and I think most people get that. So even a dumb herd of cows or a school of fish, they do realize that they should move in a certain direction at some point, and if they have to change direction, they will. And I feel like President Trump has so much going for his presidency, because on the daily level, you have the media, that's another cabal and cartel, but also they're just like pawns. I mean, they're really low on the chess ladder, let's say. I mean, these are pawns, and if they're complaining, it's also a kind of check on President Trump, but that's because they're leftists. It's not even a deep state play. But when you see the media colluding with the FBI, colluding with the CIA, and helping Spygate, then you're talking about a connection to the deep state. And so all of what I'm saying in this video is to let you know that there is something out there, and it seems evil to many of us, but at the same time you have to understand that it's a difference in thinking. It's about control. It's about a behemoth that was created, a Godzilla within our government, and presidents warned of it in the past. Well, it's something that we have. It's not as if President Trump can go out and get rid of it or destroy it. You just can't. It's almost like a parasite. But I like to see it more like a symbiotic relationship. It's just one of those things that you have to deal with. It's just like we go out in the world, there's many things we can't control. We cannot control the traffic lights. We cannot control the rules, opening hours. I mean, we're kind of like, little minions walking around in the world. And so you have to understand that it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's a bad thing if it's out of control, if it's not America first. And that's what President Trump realizes. So he's just saying we're going this way. And I believe that eventually, most of that herd will start walking in that direction. Because it's not a big change in direction. As I mentioned, it's a small change of direction. And I believe that this will happen. Now, of course, you have lots of people that are in various departments, holdovers. Some of them weren't fired yet, or some of them are like, the quiet ones. You don't even know what they're doing. And you have leakers, and you have people that are CIA assets embedded in other departments, spying on each other. But I will tell you that 2017 was really the time when President Trump was going to live or die. And he survived 2017. With Mueller and all of that, you may see it as a deep state play, and I see it as a deep state play in that they're really checking on the presidency. And it's kind of scary, because you like to think that the president is the ultimate power and the commander-in-chief. But if you just look at Choco, then the presidency wasn't all that. But now we have a man, and he's acting like the real president and the leader of our nation, and we the people. And he's even, like I said, big balls, right? He's even telling the deep state, we're going to go that way. And so what I'm saying in this very long video is that after decades and decades, I mean, these people are used to having puppets, buffoons, like W. Bush, Choco. Let's be honest, these are buffoons, and they had architects and handlers, and they're not causing any trouble. But now there's a guy who's not a puppet, and he's a genius. But on the other hand, it's not a big deal for them to really change the direction. It's all about leadership. Does Trump know how to provide that leadership that even people he doesn't even know, people that are out there in the deep state, will kind of change direction? We're not asking them to become ultra-conservatives or complete anti-globalists, but just to change direction a little bit. That's what Trump is saying, and it's not a big deal. Just America first. I mean, it's not very difficult for anyone to understand. And it's like, if you're a CEO of like a giant company, right? Tens of thousands of employees, offices all around the world, in all 50 states. You're sitting in an office. It's not like you're talking to all of these people at the same time. You don't know what all of these people are doing. The photocopy girl, the marketing director in that state, or some VP in some other country. It's like you provide a leadership, and this brings forward this notion that you're moving into a certain direction, and that mission people know about. It's called the mission statement. And so President Trump really came out with a mission statement: America first forever. Make America great again. It's not hard to understand. So even people in a deep state can adapt to it. It's a different type of globalism. This time, America first. That's okay. No problem. And we're not going to become a hermit kingdom, right? America first, and we close our borders. We're not talking to anybody anymore. I mean, maybe some of these people were thinking that Trump was like a crazy guy, but by now they know he's not. And so leftists will, cause a ruckus all the time, but who really cares, right? Who really cares? What matters is the mechanisms, the nation, and how all of the puzzle pieces fit together. Does it have to be left-wing leadership? No, because there is no leadership on the left. And are many of the people in a deep state leftists? Yes, but most are just globalists, and they're not even dedicated leftists in that they cannot be flexible. I mean, it's really about a deep state, meaning that these people are within the nation, in a way, in government. So it's not like they're a political party, or they would make one. But these are embedded people. You have leftists, you have conservatives, and you have all kinds of people in there. And maybe there's even a majority of leftists. Okay, I'm not saying they're not leftists, and globalism is leftist the way it is now. But what I'm saying is that, yes, there's going to be a change. And I believe that President Trump has that leadership that this can happen. Because when you're talking about left-wingers, especially radicals, as we see now, it's very hard to talk to these people. They're so radical, they don't understand what is what. I mean, they're so radical, they don't even understand common sense anymore. Now, are you going to spend all your time trying to convince those leftists on the far, far, far left? Or isn't it easier to provide kind of leadership that a lot of Democrats may walk away, that even a deep state will change their direction a little bit? Or will Trump have to focus on talking to these libtards on the far, far, far left? What a waste of time. It's so low level. It's almost like people fighting in the streets. It's like trolls on the internet. It's like theater. President Trump is, doing all of that with the media, everything. But what he's really doing, the strategy of what he's doing, is really bringing our nation to the next level. And that means getting that deep state to move in a different direction. And I repeat, you cannot get rid of the deep state unless you turn our republic into a totalitarian, dictatorship, and round up 10,000 people and execute them. It's not going to happen. And destroy the CIA, destroy the DOD, the FBI. I mean, you just cannot. But the truth is that as it stands now, the deep state is protecting a lot of these criminals. And all of that to make sure that, everything doesn't turn in Trump's favor. It's a kind of check, to provide a check and balance to the whole thing, because that means the deep state is not underestimating Trump. Otherwise, they wouldn't go through all this trouble, as you can imagine. So I do say that, dim-dems always underestimate Donald Trump, and that's why they're pathetic almost. But I believe that in the deep state, I think they understand the Trump rule by now. Maybe they got used to Trump. Maybe they're starting to see that he will be there for another 6 years, and they're right. And so they don't underestimate Donald J. Trump, the president, and I believe that they will adapt to that, because 6 years is a long time. And some of these minions in Congress, even people like Paul Ryan, Trey Gowdy, even Nancy Pelosi, we're not talking about people that are operating on a very high level. I mean, this is the political theater, right? The back and forth, and it's like squabbling little kids. But when you're looking at the big things, of course, you're looking at major countries, China, trade deals, Russia, MBS, Saudi Arabia, the banking system, and I mean, there's so much more happening, and it seems like the media is completely oblivious to major changes and how people react. I mean, they're so stuck in trying to make Trump look bad, or to talk about the squabbling, or to talk about a typo he made, which, by the way, it's on purpose. Every time President Trump does a typo, you have thousands and thousands of liberals retweeting it, commenting on it. Hey, he spelled that wrong. But they don't understand that he does that on purpose, because it's worth another bunch of many retweets, and he gets his message out. Nobody cares about the typo except liberals. And in some cases, he will write a post with a typo, then they all retweet it many times. But then, he reinforces it by redoing the tweet without the typo. And then he gets another bunch of retweets, the same amount. So he's like doubling the message going on. I mean, that's how dumb liberals are. And all the time there's like saying, Trump is so dumb, he cannot even spell. I mean, what a dummy. And turns out they're the dummies, right? And I believe that you have a lot of people out there in Congress, they think that Trump is dumb. But a lot of people have also realized that, hey now, if he's so dumb, why is he always winning? And people in the Senate are really happy. I mean, we got +3 now in the Senate. I mean, that's incredible. And I thought Trump was so deeply unpopular that there would be this blue wave in the Senate who would become Democrat, and no. And they couldn't even get Florida. We got DeSantis. And, of course, we got the great Rick Scott instead of Nelson and Gulam. I mean, think of it. And so, President Trump is not to be underestimated. I think people in deep state are realizing that. I mean, the Spygate, all of that, everything they tried, it failed. And I feel like, it's all about, will they make that directional change, which is not a big deal, or will they end up saying, okay, we want to get rid of this guy, he's too much. So President Trump is doing all of this in a very careful, thought-out way. He knows who to talk to, and if he's keeping the relationship with MBS, it's also talking back to the deep state. he's like saying, yeah, I know you guys want to get rid of that guy, but I like him. I like him. I want him. I need him. It's like a good relation with Saudi Arabia. And it's kind of a shift, right? It almost seems like the deep state was like ready, to have a wedding in Iran. And it's not just a Choco influence, but it has been something that has been a long time coming. It wasn't just the 8 years with Choco. It was even before that. There was something about Iran that, I think W. Bush was even approaching Iran, a lot talking tough, but still, you had deal making even in the Reagan years and afterwards. But I will say that now it's pretty clear that President Trump wants to deal with Saudi Arabia and this way and the other way and do the arms deal, and the deep state is trying to obstruct right now. So we'll see how it all pans out, but I don't have any worry. I really trust in Trump, and if it doesn't work out,